It was once San Francisco's crown jewel, 12 million visitors a year, sea lions on the docks, sourdough in the air, the smell of Dungeness crab drifting off the bay. And then, people just stopped coming. Not all at once, gradually, quietly. The way a legend dies when nobody's paying attention. This is the full story of how Fisherman's Wharf, one of the most visited destinations in American history, lost the plot completely. There's a version of Fisherman's Wharf that most people alive today never actually saw. Not the souvenir shops, not the Hard Rock Cafe, not the Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, the real version. It started with Italian immigrant fishermen, primarily from Sicily and Genoa, who settled in San Francisco's North Beach neighborhood in the mid-1800s and built their livelihoods around the bay's extraordinary marine resources. By the early 20th century, Fisherman's Wharf wasn't a tourist destination. It was a working waterfront. Real fishing boats, docking every morning. Dungeness crab and Pacific seafood, processed and sold on the same day it was pulled from the water. Restaurants that existed because the fishing families needed places to eat, and because the food was genuinely, undeniably good. The clam chowder and sourdough bread bowls, that wasn't invented by a marketing agency. It came directly out of the food culture of a fishing community. Through the mid-20th century, the Wharf developed a tourist layer on top of this authentic commercial foundation. And for a long time, the two coexisted productively. The seafood was fresh because the boats were working. The restaurants had character because the families behind them had been there for 2 or 3 generations. Skoma's, which opened in 1965 in a former bait shack on the end of a pier. Simple, direct, unpretentious. Ghirardelli Square, a retail and dining complex built inside the former Ghirardelli chocolate factory. A genuine industrial building with a genuine history dating to 1893. The Cannery, opened in 1967 inside an old Del Monte fruit and vegetable processing facility. These weren't invented backstories. They were adaptive reuse projects built around actual history. At its peak, Fisherman's Wharf was drawing 12 to 14 million visitors annually. And then, in January of 1990, something happened that no urban planner could have designed. California sea lions began colonizing Pier 39 in the weeks following the Loma Prieta earthquake of October 1989. The quake had temporarily cleared the marina of pleasure boats, leaving the dock space open. The sea lions moved in. Nobody invited them. Nobody planned them. They simply arrived and stayed. Wild, loud, chaotic, and completely indifferent to the cameras pointed at them from 15 feet away. This was a real place, with a real story. And for a long time, that authenticity was the whole product. Here's what tourists rarely think about when they talk about Fisherman's Wharf falling apart. The actual fishing boats left. The decline of commercial fishing in San Francisco Bay wasn't sudden. It was decades in the making. Overfishing of Pacific fish populations, rising regulatory costs for small independent operators, economic pressure from industrial-scale processors, and the broader collapse of certain key species. By the late 20th century, the boats that once defined those docks had largely departed. The seafood being sold on the wharf was no longer primarily caught by vessels docked 50 yards away. In some cases, it wasn't caught in California at all. Then climate disruption compounded the problem in ways no one fully anticipated. Harmful algal blooms in California coastal waters began causing domoic acid contamination, a neurotoxin that poisons shellfish and makes them unsafe to eat. The Dungeness crab season, the most symbolically central product the wharf had ever sold, was forced into extended closure in 2015 to 2016, again in 2019 to 2020, and in multiple subsequent seasons. Commercial crabbers in the Bay Area have been losing parts of seasons to these delays with increasing regularity. The seafood being served at high-end wharf restaurants, with menus proudly advertising their connection to local fishing tradition, was increasingly shipped in from Dungeness fisheries in Oregon or Washington. A $30 bowl of chowder with a nautical backstory made from crab that had never seen San Francisco Bay. That specific gap between what the place presented itself as and what it actually was became the foundation of every problem that followed. Be honest, would you pay $35 for a bowl of chowder if you knew the crab came from Oregon and the story on the menu was essentially theater? Say it in the comments. I genuinely want to know. San Francisco is one of the most expensive cities in the United States to operate a business. Commercial rents among the highest in the country, one of the highest minimum wages, significant regulatory compliance costs, a bowl of clam chowder in a sourdough bread bowl, the emblematic Fisherman's Wharf meal, runs $18 to $25 at most establishments. A full Dungeness crab from a sidewalk steam cart, $35 to $55. A sit-down dinner at a mid-tier Pier restaurant, $65 to $100 per person before drinks. None of that is gouging. It's arithmetic. The problem isn't the price. The problem is what the same money buys elsewhere in the same city. The Ferry Building Marketplace, which opened as a revitalized food hall in 2003 along the Embarcadero, is a short distance from Fisherman's Wharf, and it operates at a completely different level. Local farmers at a Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday market. A bakery whose bread is taken seriously by food writers who cover bread nationally. Fish sourced from boats the restaurants actually know by name. The Mission District has some of the best burritos in the United States, at roughly 1/3 the price of a Wharf chowder bowl. Hayes Valley restaurants run at comparable price points to the Wharf, and serve food that's actually connected to what San Francisco has become as a food city. As San Francisco food writer Jonathan Kaufman observed, the question isn't whether Fisherman's Wharf is expensive. The question is whether you're getting something that justifies the expense. For food-savvy visitors, the answer has been increasingly no. The visitor who figures this out on their first trip does not make the same mistake on their second. Walk the waterfront at Fisherman's Wharf today, and the retail experience is dominated by a specific kind of uniformity that people who knew the area in the 1970s and 1980s find genuinely disorienting. Gift shops selling cable car magnets, Alcatraz hoodies, Golden Gate snow globes, chain restaurants that could be located in any tourist district in any mid-size American city, the Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, the Hard Rock Cafe, a rainforest cafe that operated on the Pier for years. These businesses aren't there because they have anything to do with San Francisco. They're there because they have established brand recognition and reliable customer throughput, exactly the qualities that matter when you're paying tourist district rent, and exactly the opposite of what made Fisherman's Wharf worth visiting. Meanwhile, the independent restaurants that gave the neighborhood its actual character have been disappearing one by one. Pompeii's Grotto, Loose Fish Shack, Castagnola's, and Aliotto's have all closed since 2020. Aliotto's, which began as a fish stand in 1925 operated by Sicilian immigrant Nunzio Aliotto, was one of the most storied restaurants in San Francisco's history. In June 2025, after years of failing to find new tenants, the Port of San Francisco announced that the Aliotto's building, the oldest remaining structure on the wharf, would be demolished to create a public plaza. Nearly a century of continuous operation. Gone. According to 2,024-foot traffic data from the Fisherman's Wharf Community Business District, only 75% of 2019's visitor numbers have returned, and that figure is largely propped up by Pier 39, which is privately managed and benefits enormously from one specific unplannable advantage: the sea lion colony. This is where people get divided. Is this just the natural evolution of a tourist district, or is it a preventable failure? Which side are you on? San Francisco's public order challenges have had a documented and specific impact on the wharf and its surrounding corridor. The city's homelessness crisis is one of the most acute in the United States, with the unhoused population estimated at between 7,500 and over 10,000 individuals. Property crime in the tourist corridor became so consistently reported that rental car companies at San Francisco International Airport began placing explicit warnings in vehicles, advising travelers not to leave any valuables visible in parked cars. Several foreign governments' travel advisories specifically referenced San Francisco crime conditions. The city has made periodic enforcement pushes in advance of high-profile events: the Super Bowl, the Apex Summit in November 2023, when visible street conditions were meaningfully improved through concentrated effort. But those improvements have not consistently persisted after the specific events ended. This isn't the primary reason the wharf lost its appeal. The quality, value, and authenticity problems run deeper. But in an era when every visitor has access to social media, online reviews, and recent first-hand accounts from people who were just there last week, the accumulated reports of unpleasant experiences add a deterrence layer on top of all the other reasons to look elsewhere. The most consistent thing San Francisco residents say about Fisherman's Wharf is simple. They don't go there. Not because it's terrible, not because of any single specific complaint,